Joe Budden says Queen's Flip will be on the Joe Budden podcast a lot less. Now, on the last Patreon episode, Joe Budden revealed that Queen's Flip will not appear on the Joe Budden podcast as much in 2025. And he said it's because he has expressed behind the scenes that he doesn't want to be on the show as much. And this was kind of coming on the heels at an interesting time for Flip, as he's recently been going off about how he feels like they're trying to control him, specifically with improper improv. And he's also been saying that he wants to do improper improv and doesn't really want to be on the podcast. But improper improv has been a total mess. So how could he just be on that show and not the podcast? And he also says that he hates being at the podcast for long periods of time because the pod films twice a week and apparently it's a long venture. So, you know, they're probably there from 11 to like 7 and it takes up a lot of his time that he could be doing skits or doing other types of content. So Joe finally said that this is what Flip is doing and he said it on air. And I think this is a big deal, y'all. I think this is the sign of major changes to come, and Joe has kind of laid the infrastructure for Flip's exit from the show. Even though he wants Flip to stay, even though he does think Flip is dynamic, I would assume that he's just too much of a wild card to keep on the show. Flip is not like Flip is great at, you know, maintaining, you know, content, but I don't think he's the business guy. Like, he's very stubborn. He's not flexible. Anytime Ian tries to get him to do something, he questions it. And then there's his unprofessionalism. Like, anytime somebody pushes back against Flip, he gets unprofessional. I said this in my last video. Remember when Joe suspended Flip? And Flip, well, instead of listening to Ian, who was relaying the message that Flip was suspended, he went to Joe's house, pulled up across the street. And he has a history of this. He did the same thing to Space when Space wanted to leave his show. So, I don't know. It is crazy to me how Joe said that Rory and Mal weren't mature. That Rory and Mal didn't know how to deal with business. Yet Flip is way more unprofessional than Rory and Mal ever were. Rory and Mal wanted to get lawyers involved. They wanted accounting. They actually did show up to work. And it was Joe that would bring up the business on air. Yet, we have Flip here, who has made the craziest transgressions. He almost fought Imani. He made Melyssa Ford walk off set. Though that was a little bit Melyssa Ford being sensitive. And he doesn't listen to what Ian or Joe has to say. He feels like they're trying to manipulate him. And I think overall, Joe finally breaking and saying that Flip will appear on the podcast a lot less is a sign that his patience is wearing thin. And you know whose patience is also wearing thin? The audience. They're growing tired of Flip's antics, though one could argue that even though they're growing tired, they're still watching, and this type of content is what gets reacted to the most and clipped up to the most, you know, capacity. But I just think Flip isn't being engaging. Like, this is the same old act. This is the same thing over and over. Like, how many times are you going to say, oh, I'm mad. Oh, I'm being controlled. Eventually just leave. Why does Flip want Joe to be the one to push the eject button? Better yet, why does Joe want Flip to be the one to leave? Somebody got to put your big boy pants on. One of these guys, they're being immature. They're being little kids. Have a conversation. Do you want to be on the podcast? And if the conversation isn't satisfactory, if it's, oh, I just want more control, then we're not going to give you that control. You know what? In a couple months, you out of here, and we're going to end this thing amicably. Because right now, it looks really, really amateur hour. And that's why you got to end things early sometimes. Sometimes when you stick around too long, you just look stupid. And I think both of these guys are looking really crazy right now. And I don't know. All right, y'all, but let me know what you think about Joe Budden's assertion that Queen's Flip will be appearing on the podcast a lot less starting January 2025. Do you think it's content over everything? This was on the Patreon episode. Paxton and Pippin. Cash Doll was on the show. Shout out to Cash Doll. Really beautiful lady. Also, I want to end this video by saying I saw that Melyssa Ford's new show, Hot and Bothered, released its second episode. Now, a lot of people are saying the second episode is really good, so check it out. But what I did notice is a severe drop-off from the 34,000 views that it got in the premiere episode to the 2,800 views it got in the second episode. Now, I must say, that's a big drop-off. And if it continues to go this way, she will stop making the podcast. I know a lot of people are saying the audio numbers are not everything, but I can tell you right now, the YouTube numbers are a good index. Because if your YouTube numbers are really low, how high can your audio numbers be? Now, it's possible maybe Melyssa Ford's audience prefers audio, but Melyssa Ford has a big team. I was telling people in another video that it takes $1,000 for Melyssa Ford to record a podcast. And people were in the comments like, oh, Danny, that's what, Mandy's charging you for a studio. No, just look at her production values. She has makeup, probably has hair. She says she got some dude from iHeart helping to produce the show. That's easily $1,000. Hell, I could argue even $3,000. So let's say you make 30 videos or 30 podcasts. That is $90,000 or $30,000. For you to be getting 2,800 views is a significant flop. This is why I suggested the route of, a lifestyle blog. It's a lot cheaper. And I think people just want to see Melyssa Ford be herself, be sexy, show up to the pod with the, Osmo Pocket, do exactly what Damaris from the Rory and Malt podcast does. Because, this is just a lot of coordination. And if the views are already dropping, I don't know how long this is going to last. But let me know what you think. I was initially going to do a review of episode 1 of Melyssa Ford's podcast, but there wasn't much going on that episode. It was a solo episode. It was only 30 minutes long. And it looked like the producer was fed up with how little she was giving up. And a lot of people are saying, hey, Danny, your podcast failed. Why are you talking about that? My podcast didn't fail. It was successful to me. We did 3 episodes and I realized this isn't worth it. It's just too much money. I could be doing what I'm doing right now in this video and make as much money. And, it takes up a lot of time. And to be quite honest, if Melyssa Ford's views keep going this way, it looks like Stop the King was probably going to be more successful. We were getting at least 10,000 views or more. And our clips were doing 20,000 views at times. Easily over 10,000 views. 25,000 views. So, I'm sorry, man. I truly believe that Stop the King was an amazing podcast. It just was too much logistically. And there was a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes, which I said before. Sometimes you got to know when to pull the plug on something. And that's what I did. All right, y'all, but let me know what you think about what I said earlier, what I reported earlier about Flip not being on the show as much in 2025. Follow me on Instagram, The Stop TV. Follow me on Twitter, The Stop TV. This is Danny from The Stop. Peace.